filmmaker, Michael Sarnoski, who is responsible for this beautiful film, who's responsible for Nick Cage movie Pig from 2021, where Michael won Best Director from National Board of Review and Indie Spirit Award for First Screenplay. Just an incredibly talented filmmaker. More than that, he traversed 7 hours of flight delays, a 3-hour drive from Madison, Wisconsin, 6 pieces of baggage that's lost in Chicago right now. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Michael Sarnoski up here to the stage.
I have a beer. Sorry, I'm wearing pajama pants because all my luggage got lost.
No.
He kindly got me this shirt, which I really like now, and I'm gonna definitely keep. But yeah, this is not my usual sense.
Well, I mean, first and foremost, Michael, like, you know, before we start talking about A Quiet Place, let's see, there, oh yeah.
Yeah.
Hold on. Oh.
Wait, I still think.
One more,
Wait,
Jameson.
let me press this button. Oh wait, no. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So, you know, I'm sure there's a lot of questions that the audience has about Quiet Place, but I think we want to start off with Pig, which was a film that I actually saw here in the Quad Cities in a packed theater in Davenport, and the audience was just absolutely enamored by this movie. And it felt like a movie that all of a sudden all my other friends were starting to talk about, and it just had this huge wave that people just absolutely adored this movie. I'm so curious in terms of like what it was like, first and foremost, to work with Nick Cage, an icon of our generation.
Yeah.
Working with Nick was amazing. I mean, we shot that movie we shot it in 20 days, and we could not have done that if he wasn't just like the most professional actor in the world. I mean, he was so on top of it. He was so on top of it, and I'm so scared. I'm so okay. He was so on top of it. He was like, I mean, it was 2 takes for everything. He knew exactly what that character was about. He knew exactly how he wanted to play it. Yeah, I mean, he was kind to everyone on set. He would share his rotisserie chicken with everyone. That was an interesting. He got rotisserie chicken every day for lunch, which I think is like a thing he had learned long ago on like smaller movies. Like if you're gonna get the food, just like order a rotisserie chicken because it's gonna be safe wherever you go.
Kind of like a very Quiet Place sound. I think we just murdered some, death angels here.
But no, he was wonderful. He's a very committed actor and really easy to work with. And I was a first-time director, and he could have easily kind of shrugged me off and been like, do you know how many movies I've been in? But instead, he was so respectful and so like, if the DP would ask him to turn his head for the light, he would be like, is that what the director wants? And he was just, I don't know, really cool.
No further questions. My microphone doesn't work. So, how did you come onto this project? We're such huge fans of your work, and it felt like a perfect kind of marriage of sensibility and world with A Quiet Place. But I'm just curious what your introduction was to this movie and this opportunity and so forth.
Yeah, I think John Krasinski had seen Pig, and I guess he liked it. And he reached out and said, yeah, would you be interested in coming onto this project? Like, I really responded to Pig. Would you want to kind of bring some of that sensibility to the Quiet Place universe? And yeah, he kind of gave me the broad strokes of, I don't know, is it just because we're too close to each other? Is it?
Let's see, I just turned this one off.
Okay, if we just do one at a time. Oh, wow, that's so clear. Yeah, so he was just kind of like, can you bring some of that Pig touch to this universe? And, that kind of, in the moment, you're not sure what that means, but mostly I just had to like sit back and kind of think about what would I care about and what would I want to follow in this universe and what kind of like character story would I want to tell. And I think the one prompt from him and from Paramount was we want to do like a New York Day One thing. So I kind of just thought about all the things I didn't want to see in a movie like that, all the stuff that I feel like you would normally see of like, you know, a military like fighting the aliens thing, or scientists being like, oh, we've dissected their brains and we figured this out, and I was just like, what if I was following a character that wasn't even really trying to survive? And that kind of opened it up for me, and yeah, that kind of became my in to the movie, and then I wrote a script and directed it, and then they released it,
And then
I just watched it.
And then it became the highest grossing opening weekend of the franchise, which is
Yeah.
I thought your approach, kill me.
No, I'll turn mine off while you talk.
I thought your approach to the film, like talking about like doing the opposite of what's expected, especially in like the disaster movie genre, like that's how when we first conceived of the movie, like those were the kind of the thoughts in our head, like let's do the idyllic farmhouse instead of like a big city. But you had to go into the big city and do the day one and show the origins of sorts for the invasion. But what I thought was so brilliant is you found these little like these poetic character moments. And I also love just like the overall like arching kind of point A to point B is like, let's get pizza. Like there's just something so simple and human about that. Can you talk about some of these, like your approach to character, and when you think of, like when you were writing this movie, that I assume you were, in your head, you were thinking like, okay, it's a studio, or maybe you weren't, but like it's a studio movie, I've got to check certain boxes, I have to have, certain set pieces and scares that maybe the audience would expect, but can you talk about approaching it with character as well?
I was aware that there would be certain boxes that needed to be checked. I tried not to worry about that too much, and the studio did a great job of reminding me of what boxes they needed checked. So I didn't have to like overthink about that. I could kind of, I was focused on the character stuff, and then inevitably there would be conversations like, yeah, well, but we do need a little bit of this stuff, and so I would try and find ways to kind of sneak that in, but find ways to do it very character based. And I mean that was what I loved about the first Quiet Place, was that it, like, yes, there were monsters, but they were very kind of fundamental. It was this just idea of like, if you make a sound, something's gonna come out of the shadows and kill you, and it was just that kind of like constant reminder of something that's fundamentally human. Our ability to communicate with sound is not something we can do anymore, and if we do, you'll die, and that sort of sense of violation, like I liked that, then paired with this like very intimate family drama, like that was what the Quiet Place was to me. And yeah, I kind of felt like in some ways doing a loud day one New York City thing was kind of counter to what was fundamentally what that franchise was about. So finding a way to kind of do that in a quiet, intimate way and keeping it focused on character was kind of my like just main focus on this, and I had to really care about that character and really be centered on it.
One of the things when we were writing the original that kind of was our foundation for it was doing like Days of Heaven meets Alien, where it's like a genre piece, but it's like, kind of on this idyllic farmscape. I'm curious for you, because I see so much inspiration, whether it's like Children of Men, like I could apply that as like, something that I see in the movie. Are there any like foundations that you use as kind of like a guiding, force for the film?
Yeah, Children of Men was definitely one. I mean, that was one I talked to Pat Skoll, the cinematographer, about a lot. He was the DP on Pig as well, and it was really great to have him on this project. I couldn't have done it without him, and that really helped keep kind of our sensibilities. But yeah, Children of Men was a big one in the sort of sense of how to do a story that has a lot of scope and intensity and sort of implications to the wider world, but do it in a way that feels very boots on the ground and very gritty and present. I think there is like, I think in some ways we try to avoid this, but on some levels, if the first Quiet Place was Alien, this is sort of like the aliens of that. It's when it sort of gets bigger and there's a little more action, but I tried to sort of avoid some of the tropes of what might come with that. I mean, I love both of those movies, but I think, I didn't want to just go like, oh, now we're just doing a big, like, machine gun movie or something. But I mean, other than that, what were I don't know. I mean, I think I just had to focus so much on Sam's character that I wasn't thinking too much about what movies to compare it to, and just kind of being like, yeah, what would a story about a dying person getting pizza feel like? Like, what should that mood be? And I just kind of went with that.
I really loved how you use the sound, the premise, or not the premise, the concept of if you make a sound, you die. I felt you took that kind of core concept or gimmick, and then you activated it in ways through character that I really responded to. And maybe you can talk about a couple of these scenes if you have anything to say, but like the ones that really moved me the most, there's a scene where they're in that like apartment building and it's thundering outside, and they use that as an opportunity to like release emotion. Found that so powerful. And then my favorite scene in the movie, the magic show. The silent magic show, where you just, again, you're taking the gimmick, and instead of using it as like, wouldn't this be cool as a set piece if the sound on the fire alarm, like you're using it for character and emotion, and it's just so beautiful. I mean, can you talk about conceiving those scenes and working on those scenes?
Yeah, I remember the Screaming with the Thunder one was one of like the first idea. You always have like a few sort of images or ideas for a movie that you start with, and that was one that just kind of from early on, I was like, what if like in the middle of the movie there was just like a long dialogue scene that culminated in people screaming it with thunder. Like that was just sort of a thing. But I mean, there's this kind of recurring thing in the movie of, if our ability to communicate is kind of hindered or taken away, we're artists, and like we love to find ways to communicate through art. And there's sort of this question of like, when communication is gone, what happens to art, and what happens to like those ways of communicating with each other? And that's why there are a couple like silent kind of artistic moments with the puppet show that's kind of mirrored with a magic trick, and then Sam's poetry is kind of like this fundamental thing of that's like speech boiled down to just sort of this like fundamental poetry. So there was this kind of thing I wanted to explore of like how people could connect and communicate in like deep and beautiful ways, even in this silent world. So a lot of those scenes kind of came from that feeling, and that also comes from kind of Sam's character, who like feels like she's isolated herself from that ability to connect, like something that she used to really love to do, and it's sort of through this silent world that she's able to kind of reconnect to that part of herself, connect to other people again, and then connect to her past through that.
I wanted to ask about the music, actually. Marco Beltrami, who scored the first two, was taken over by a beautiful score. I think one of my favorite scores, not just from this franchise, but I think beyond that, from recent movies. And this is a composer that you worked with before, right, on Pig, Alexis? Can you talk about like kind of the collaboration of working with the composer, on A Quiet Place, and multiple times too?
Yeah, I mean, so I'd worked with him on Pig. We had a wonderful working relationship. And same with the cinematographer. I was like, let's do this bigger thing and explore a bigger opportunity and see if we can use the same sensibilities and the same shorthand we have on this. And we approached it in a similar way. Like I remember on Pig, one of the first things we did was talk about like finding the instruments and sounds that we wanted for various characters and various themes. So like early on, he was trying to find kind of Sam's sound, and we ended up with this, it was like a bass clarinet that was treated in a certain way, and he created this like really simple but beautiful kind of sad theme that also had this kind of weird hope and peace to it. And then for the creatures, he played with this like bowed guitar mixed with some distortion and then some like weird rhythmic stuff. So step one was kind of finding some of the sounds that we wanted to play with, building those into themes, and then like starting to play with where in the movie those themes could exist. And those were like the first, it was Sam's theme and the creature theme. Then as you start sort of laying those in, you decide, well, we kind of need something else here. So we sort of created this like friendship theme for when Eric and Sam were connecting, when they first meet, when they're on the balcony and she gives him the sweater, when they say goodbye. And then those things kind of start like reflecting some of those other themes. So we sort of approach it through, sound, the uniqueness of that sound, and then building it through like theme and how it needs to serve all those different moments. And then sometimes you're just like, can you write a really pretty sounding puppet show piece? And he's like, yeah, I got you.
Which I have to say, that puppet show, again, one of my favorite scenes of the film. Again, I think the biggest challenge that you had was like building the antithesis of what an apocalyptic New York movie could be, because we've all seen those, but you achieved such a great contrast to that. When we were watching it in the theater and seeing, the puppet show, I'm like, what movies, especially produced by Michael Bay, like take their time to just, you know, do a quiet puppet show. Was that a scene that like you had an image of like early on, or how did that kind of come about?
Yeah, I'm trying to think. At some point, I decided I wanted her to have to go into the city for a puppet show. I think there was something about the kind of initial eye roll to that of like, really, I want to go to like a kids show, and like if you can take that and then turn it into something beautiful and something that moves the character, I was like, if we can do that, that's kind of what we're trying to do with the movie. Is like, you can take like, okay, we're gonna do a day one invasion movie, but if you can like turn that into something emotionally beautiful, that could be exciting, and it sort of gives it a reason to exist. And then like, I don't know, I just watched a lot of videos of different puppet shows, and then we ended up with this is like an old classic vaudeville puppet thing where you have sort of the sad clown, and they blow up the balloon and it pops, and you know, there were all these different sort of things we were playing with there of like, you know, this is kind of about how her life has been cut short. It also, like, we designed the puppet to kind of reflect sort of an English schoolboy look that's a little reminiscent of Eric's character, and like there were all these kind of things we were playing with, but at its core it was about, you know, being moved by something unexpected that could communicate through silence, and yeah, and that you sort of like were a little surprised by.
Was it challenging at all? Like you have like with the terminal illness main character, it's such a dark movie. Was it challenging navigating the kind of studio politics, and like when you screened it, did people get it, or was it like, why isn't this more fun like the last movie? I'm just out of curiosity, because it's such you're walking a tightrope and you pull it off beautifully, but I can only imagine how hard that would be.
Yeah, it was really hard. It's one of those, I remember when I barely pitched it. Like the pitch to John into the studio was like 2 sentences. It was like, you know, I don't really want to do a lot of this other stuff. Like I want to do a movie about a dying person going to get pizza, and like sort of use the city as a reflection of her own inner world, and sort of that death being projected around her, and how that sort of weirdly becomes her superpower because she's already had to deal with that, and she sort of takes this in a different way. And I opened that, like that was sort of the whole pitch, and I think I opened it with like, guys, I don't think this is like the most marketable version of this movie, but like here's what I would do. And the response was like, heck yeah, let's do it. And then like, you know, and then I think some of the realities set in of like, oh yeah, this is a little unusual. And then like, you know, you preview it, and like it definitely had that feeling of like some people really got it, and then some people were like, where was all the boom boom? And like, and then there were lots, you know, plenty of conversations about like, well, maybe we should put a little more boom boom here, and then like, and so yeah, it was definitely sort of a give and take and all that classic process stuff. But you know, I mean, I was happy that kind of in the end, at its core, it kind of kept that soul that it needed. But no, it was definitely like a lot of finding that balance and keeping everyone kind of happy.
And we'll open it up to the audience if they have any better questions. I'm sure they do. And then I really want to hear about working with Lupita. I think she's like magnificent in the film, and probably one of the great actors of our time, and what that experience was with casting and just working day to day. And yeah, I'd love to hear about your process.
Yeah, I mean, she was wonderful. I mean, it's a really hard role to play. She's both juggling, you know, like set pieces and all this crazy stuff she has to deal with, being really scared, but at the same time, she's constantly tracking her physical deterioration, the kind of constant awareness.
Saying, like how sick she, like playing sick, but scared and running. I mean, that's impossible. And I can imagine like in a rough cut, like the studio being like not getting like, you know, that's such a hard balance. I don't think people realize
it's really hard. And I think a lot of it, she's like she's a very committed and very like studious actor. Like she really will go through the script, challenge you in like the right ways to be like, okay, what are we doing right here? Like, how are we trying to approach this moment? And like, you really have to have good answers for her and kind of be on the same page together, which we really needed for a movie like this, because yeah, she was tracking that journey for her character so specifically and had every little nuance of that mapped out. And yeah, I mean, it really comes across, but it was not easy. It's not just like kind of like looking a little sleepy and stumbling around. Like she was like her breath work that she was doing, and how she was changing the way she was speaking over the course of it, and then on top of that, having like this kind of arc where she goes from kind of closed off and sort of bitter to more connected, and like, yeah, it was kind of incredible to watch. In also the fact that you generally shoot these things out of order, to see how she could kind of track how she was doing that day to day was, yeah, I mean, she's amazing.
Did you guys do a lot of rehearsal? Like, is she somebody who likes to improv, or?
Not improv. We did like, I think we had a day of rehearsal, so not a ton. But also like, there's not a ton of dialogue scenes in it, so yeah, we kind of did some rehearsals, found the general beats. But then she and Joe are both very like physical actors. Like, they really like to kind of find the scenes in the blocking, and the way we had to make this, we were like finishing building sets the day before we would be shooting, and we were constantly turning over. We shot this, like a lot of the exterior stuff we shot on a backlot in London that we built as this like 2-block New York thing that we had to constantly turn over for different parts of New York. So it started as Chinatown, then it was destroyed Chinatown, then it had to be turned over for the Lower East Side, then like Midtown, then Upper East Side, then Harlem. And so like we sort of would just get on set each day and have to kind of figure out the blocking and figure out how this scene would play out, and her physicality was such a big part of that. So yeah, we kind of had to roll with it sometimes, but we had the general idea after that day of rehearsals, and then we would sort of figure it out on the day. But also like she and Joe were really good at sort of feeling each other out, really watching each other, really, and you kind of have to, because a lot of the scenes are so quiet that it's just about someone seeing someone else and learning to empathize with them. So, I mean, they were just really on point with all that stuff.
I have to ask about the cat. I mean, I read like a 10 question and answer interview with you in Hollywood Reporter about the cat, so I'm sure you're tired talking about the cat, but you did travel here from New York with a cat who is in the audience here. So I am...
That's Navi. This is our cat, Navi. We got her 4 months ago, and we love her very much.
So I have to ask, at what point was the idea of the cat brought into the equation, and how insane did you feel to, propose working with an animal every single day on a crazy movie like this?
Yeah, pretty insane. I left Pig thinking, well, that was fun, but like, I'm gonna not work with an animal for a while again. You just like, you lose so much control on set when you have an animal. Like, you're just kind of at their whim. And then I wrote a script that had a cat in pretty much every scene. And then the studio was like, well, we'll like, do a CG cat or something. And I was like, but I think it should be a real cat. So we ended up not doing a CG cat at all, and it was all real cat stuff. And yeah, it was kind of crazy, but I think it was worth it. I think you like actually feel like Frodo is a real character on screen and a real character in the story. I think the initial idea, if the first idea was sort of Sam being this hospice patient, the cat came very quickly after that. I knew she kind of needed like some token that was this relic of her life in New York City, and I like the idea that Frodo was this cat that she probably had in the city. It was like a street cat that she had sort of brought on as a pet. And I also just love the image of like her walking through kind of a destroyed New York with this cat. So I don't know, it kind of came hand in hand with her as a hospice patient, as this person who had kind of left behind her city. And then it became this kind of symbol of connection between her and Eric. And I don't know, the cat just seemed really obvious, and it also seemed like one of the few animals that might have a shot of like living in the Quiet Place world, because dogs would be